On the reaction this week.
How Meghan and Harry devastated the late Queen by using her nickname Lilibet, claims royal author Robert Hardman in his new book. He joins us to reveal more.
And after his huge win in Iowa, is Donald Trump now a slam dunk to win back the White House?
And as Rishi Sunak battles for political survival, why have the Tories got such a death wish?
And as the Fujitsu bosses finally admit they knew about the problems with the post office IT system, we'll ask why it'll take more than an apology to compensate the sub-postmasters for this terrible scandal.
Hello and welcome to The Reaction with me, Sarah Vine.
And me, Andrew Pearce, and we're going to be here every Wednesday on the Daily Mail's YouTube channel, so like and subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
And thank you for all your comments and emails about last week's show, which was the first one. Here's the reaction to the reaction.
Well, we had loads of comments about the show and a frankly fabulously bitchy review in The Guardian. So we must be doing something right.
Yeah, they said I was superannuated.
You probably are.
I am superannuated, but it's rude to say it. Isn't it?
You're superannuated. I'm very
Or just
rude.
super, maybe.
And many of you emailed and texted to say how much you enjoyed it, including this one from Jean, who says, at last, straight talking and honestly reflecting the views of the British people.
Mary D emailed to say, I love the fact that Andrew and Sarah have different views on things and raise points that I wouldn't have thought of. I have to say, though, I am a bit obsessed with how neat and shiny Andrew's hair is. There was one other comment that I thought was brilliant, which said you look more and more like Kenneth Williams every day. Can you do an imitation? Can you do an impression?
Oh, can I do Kenneth Williams? Maybe I can. I'd rather look like Kenneth Williams than be looking like Sid James,
Yes.
who looked like an old man when he was 22, or worse, they could have said I look like Barbara Windsor. No, that's you. That's you. And on the topic of the problem Prince Andrew, Peter Owen served in the Royal Navy at the same time as both Charles and the Duke of York, and he emails to say, I never heard a bad word about Charles and I never heard a good one about Andrew. The arrogance and sense of entitlement you both described was clearly apparent during his service.
Yeah, I'd heard that too. Our discussion about Paula Venables and the Post Office scandal generated a lot of comments, including this one from John on YouTube. I usually read Sarah Vine's column and often agree with her. However, she has got this completely wrong. The only witch hunt was against the sub-postmasters, and Venables seems to have been the witch-finder general. I think that's a fair comment.
I think it is. And Jackie Chamber emails and says, do you think that Fujitsu has other government contracts in the UK? If so, they should be revealed. Let's really hope they're not in charge of postal voting, as it does seem they have the ability to tamper with things. Well, we're going to be talking about Fujitsu quite a lot in this programme. So thank you for all your emails and comments. We want you to keep them coming. We'll read them all and we'll be featuring some every week. But first up this week, it is Royal Reaction. All this week, the Mail has been serialising Robert Hardman's brilliant book, Charles III, New King, New Court, and there have been a number of bombshell revelations, including the claim that late Queen Elizabeth was devastated when Meghan and Harry claimed she'd endorsed their decision to use her childhood nickname Lilibet for their daughter. Robert joins us in the studio now.
What an amazing week you've had, Robert.
Well, thank you. Thank you both very much. It's certainly seemed to have attracted a bit of attention.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's lots of other angles in the book there. I mean, it's just been an extraordinary year and a bit in the history of this country, really. When you look back to, you know, the summer of 2022, and there we were all celebrating the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and then within a matter of months we were there at her state funeral. And we've been through this historic upheaval. And the monarchy is still in very good shape.
Yes, and there are lots of naysayers. I mean, this story about Lilibet is fascinating because a lot of people were a little bit raised eyebrows when they heard that the baby had been called Lilibet, because that was a very private name, wasn't it, of Elizabeth's? Yeah,
and I mean, the Queen adored Harry. Harry adored the Queen. She met Lilibet, she was lucky enough to meet her, and clearly adored her. That's not an issue. What is the nub of this is how the release of the name was handled. It was the fact that the couple said that the Queen had been very supportive of their decision, and then it was a BBC story actually saying that well, no, she hadn't been asked. to which a couple then resorted to lawyers and fired off various warnings. And then they suddenly stopped because the palace was not prepared to endorse their version of events. And in that situation, they had no choice but to backtrack. And what I discovered in the course of my research is that effectively you don't put words in the mouth of the Queen. You don't say the Queen said this and she didn't.
It's another recollections may vary.
It is precisely, as I say in the book, it's a case of recollections may vary.
And interestingly, Meghan and Harry, who are quick to respond, they've got a battery of advisors, they have not contradicted what you've said in the book.
Well, I
they've
think
wheeled out that ridiculous Omid Scobie, their chum.
I don't know what's gone on there. I mean, I haven't heard anything from them, and you know, it's like I said, it's not. I mean, it's a book about Charles III. Sure. It's not a book about them. But and you know, it's. I think, you know, it just goes back to, as you said, recollections may vary. I mean, I'm sure they've got their own you know, version of events.
I think it would have been fine if they'd had it Diana Lilibet.
That'd have been perfect answer, wouldn't it?
I just think I don't think on its own it's a problem, but I just think when you add it to everything else, all the other problems that they've had, all the other things they've said about the royal family, the documentary, the accusations of race, it just all feels a bit. You know, and also the other thing about them is that they did expressly leave because they didn't want to be part of the royal family. They didn't want to do what royals have to do. They didn't want to be part of that. And then to name their daughter in that way just seems so contradictory to many people,
cynical. I think. Breathtakingly cynical.
It does seem, you know, if by taking that decision, by choosing that name, I mean, that was inviting a whole load of issues that simply wouldn't have applied with any other name. But I mean, you know, I can see why, you know, they regard this as, you know, intensely personal matter, naming of an adored baby child. I get all that. But if you're going to appropriate a unique name, a unique royal name, that, you know, whenever anybody said Lilibet, there's never Lilibet who.
Quite, there's only one.
Then I think there comes with that a risk of, you know, a reaction.
But it was a way of trying to own and ensure that they stay attached to the most famous, enduring member of the royal family in our history.
Who knows?
The Queen, of course, Robert, had an intensely personal faith. Her Christianity, her going to church, religion was incredibly important to her, and she took incredibly seriously her role as head of the Church of England. Now, your book reveals that Prince William, who doesn't go to church very often, Christmas and Easter, like a lot of people, like Sarah Vine probably, unlike me, I go quite a lot.
Do you now?
I do, good Catholic boy. But it reveals he's like a lot of people of his age, doesn't see the relevance of the church, and may not even take on that role, been around since Henry VIII, of head of the Church of England.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that's under discussion. I mean, as I say in the book, he's not, as in the words of one close to him, he's not instinctively comfortable in a faith environment. He totally respects the important role that churches play and faiths play in the lives of millions of his future subjects. That's not an issue. But what I say in the book is, you know, given that he is as lukewarm about going to regular church going, certainly compared to his father or his grandmother, that, you know, it wouldn't be as much of a big deal if the whole issue of disestablishment comes up.
How that would create disestablishment questions, all sorts of constitutional issues.
It's a totally constitutional issue, which is why it wouldn't ultimately really be one for him in the first instance. It would be one for government anyway.
I mean, it would also be quite a blow for the Church of England, wouldn't it? Which is not doing terribly well as it is.
At all, particularly under the leadership of well, he's the leader of the Anglican Church.
And a lot of other faiths,
the Archbishop.
A lot of other faiths are very, not just comfortable, but I mean, they're very keen on the fact that the monarch is effectively a person of faith. I've spoken to many leaders of other faiths, other minorities, who take a view that just the fact of having the monarch as supreme governor of the Church of England, that puts faith at the sort of heart of the nation state. It by default acts as a defence for other faiths. Now, I think, I've no doubt, in fact, that's how Prince William would look at it. But as I say in the book, he's not. He sees himself as, like most people, he just doesn't go to church very often, and it's not a big thing to him.
No.
The book is about Charles III. he's following in the footsteps of the most illustrious monarch.
Give him marks out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard act to follow.
Impossible act to follow. I mean, Elizabeth II broke every single record in the book, bar one, which was Louis XIV's record for the longest reign, but he started
Did Louis XIV start when he was about 2?
He started when he was 8, and it was a regency, so it doesn't really count. But so, yeah, she broke all the records, and you've got to follow that. That's a really big challenge for anybody. And I think we look at where the monarchy is today compared to what people might have thought in those, febrile days after the death of Elizabeth II. I think most people would be very surprised that it's absolutely rock solid. It's not been questioned. He's seen as a sure-footed king. He's had a very good start. There've been no royal crises. I mean, none that he
not of his own making.
Not of his own making.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that haven't beyond his control, namely, whatever
Harry
goes on in
Meghan.
Montecito,
Harry and
the
Meghan.
Duke of York.
Yeah.
And there will be. I'm quite sure there will be issues to do with historic restorative justice in some of his realms across the Commonwealth. That's becoming a bigger and bigger thing. Again, not something he can really do anything about. But when it just comes to that simple royal role of embodying the nation state, going about your business without making speeches and telling people what you think, just being there representing the nation, and adding that sense of sort of continuity and stability, particularly through a period of genuine political instability.
He's also got the advantage too, I would say, Robert, unlike other kings and queens. Like his mother, he is fantastically well known all around the world.
Yes.
I mean, Queen Marguerite, I had to look at the picture of Queen Marguerite when she stood down, abdicated in Denmark after 50 years.
The chain-smoking Queen Marguerite, I didn't realise that. That amused me.
I didn't have a clue what she looked like. You show the picture of the king to people all around the world, they know exactly who he is, because he's the son of the most photographed woman
and
that's ever
also
walked on
he's
this
been
planet.
around for a very long time. But I do think that I do think he was dealt quite a difficult hand, what with the Harry and Meghan stuff and with Prince Andrew stuff and the political situation. And I think so far he's just played it very well. I really do. He's very comfortable in his own skin, and I think that really comes across. I think Camilla has played a large part in that. I think
Queen Camilla too.
Queen Camilla, sorry. I think he's very comfortable in this. It's a brilliant book, and everyone should read it. Charles III.
It is.
And you can hear more from Robert on Thursday's episode of our smash hit royal show, Palace Confidential.
Very good.
There was a nuclear reaction to Donald Trump's landslide victory in Iowa this week, meaning he's another step closer to winning back the White House. Andrew, do you think anything can stop him?
Well, the courts are going to try and stop him because I think they know the American voters want him back. And actually, I wasn't always the greatest fan of Donald Trump, but look at the alternative. Doddery old Joe Biden, who's clearly got cognitive issues. He can't remember his name. He told us how sad it was that his son died in the war in Afghanistan. No, he didn't. I mean, he didn't even serve in Afghanistan.
I know. And, I mean, for me, the fact that he did that speech in Ireland and got the All Blacks mixed up with the black and tans.
Couldn't have been a more sensitive subject.
Really not very. Couldn't have been a more sensitive. I mean, so he is a bit of a liability.
No, he's not a bit of a liability. He's a disaster. I don't want him anywhere near the nuclear front. He's doddery. He's got to go. Trump's the one who can beat him.
But so Trump himself is not great. I mean, all that stuff with the Capitol Hill, inciting all those mad people to go and sort of, people died during that.
They did.
I mean, it was not, it was not acceptable. I mean, I have to say, the thing about Trump is, he didn't do anything awful when he was president. He sort of didn't do anything at all, really. But I think that
he didn't start a war.
Okay, he didn't start a war. He didn't really build his wall.
Well, he started to build the wall and he cut immigration, and under Joe Biden, nearly 4 million migrants have sauntered through the border with Mexico, and Biden doesn't seem to care.
No, well, he can't do anything about it because it's not his voter base, is it?
No.
So he has to be very careful. But the thing I would say about Trump is that if it hadn't been for that disaster in Capitol Hill and that sort of moment of madness where he basically refused to accept the result of the election, I wouldn't be so against him, but I just think he has to stop behaving like such a massive baby. I mean, he needs to take this seriously. I mean, America needs a serious, competent president, and I think Trump can be that.
Yeah, look.
If he stops being such a sort of appalling populist. I mean, I met him once when at one of those at the what they call the royal banquets.
State banquet.
State banquet. And
did he behave appropriately?
Well, he is like a big orange sun in any room. I mean, the ego, he sort of sucks everything into his orbit. I spoke to Melania for quite a long time. She's
Catwoman,
extraordinary up close. And sort of very inscrutable. But he is this massive, massive ego. And I think that, I think you have to be very careful not to make the mistake that Hillary made when the first time he was elected, when she called his voters deplorables. Yeah. Because you can't, people vote the way they vote for good reasons. She was very
working class voters. He's a very rich man. He does speak
to them.
He's tapped into that. He's clever. He's a great communicator. Yeah. He's a big figure on the international stage. Yeah. Look, in an ideal world, a country with a population of 330 million would not present, again, a choice of dopey Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Yeah. But if we're going to stop a man who's probably got senile dementia from becoming the next president, well, I think he's on the way there. There's signs already. He should be forced to have a test. But what Trump needs to do, I think what Trump needs to do is to just take it all a lot more seriously and stop being such a He'll look at the polls and think, why should I? His margin of victory in Iowa was the biggest in the history of the Republican Party.
I mean, in the paper yesterday, someone said, they'd vote for him even if he was in jail, and I think the truth is they would. And the thing is, the more these injunctions happen against him, the more people try to take him to court to stop him, the more his supporters love him.
But the funny thing is, Sarah, you mentioned jail. Even if he was in jail, he can campaign to be president of the United States, because that's how mad the American system is.
You can't be president, though, if you're actually in jail.
No, but he can campaign for the Republican primaries as the contender from jail, and wouldn't that be a great campaigning slogan for him?
It would be absolutely insane.
It would be a gift. And every time they slap another indictment on him, his poll rating goes up even further. And by the way, what happened to that drippy Nikki Haley, who was supposed to be the great Democrat hope to stop him? She's the former UK ambassador. She was trailing on about 19 or 18%. I heard her speech. She made Hillary Clinton look statesman-like and charismatic.
I know, but isn't this all part of the fact that politics everywhere just seems to be completely off the rails?
You're suggesting that Rishi Sunak's off the rails? Really?
Right, anyway.
What do you know about that?
Who knows?
What about the levelling up secretary? Is he off the rails?
I have no idea.
Michael Gove?
Do you think Trump is going to win back the White House? Let us know your reaction at reaction@dailymail.co.uk or comment below.
You could ask, do you want him to win back the White House?
Yeah.
Because I think I do.
You do?
Well, I'd rather that than Biden.
Who's going to run with him?
It will not be a black woman for the sake of it, which is what Biden did with Kamala Harris, and she's turned out to be a complete disaster. I don't know. It could be this guy who's a billionaire, 38-year-old, who withdrew from the race this week. I can't pronounce it.
Vivek, yes.
I think it could be him. It'd be quite clever because he's got Hispanic blood in him, so he can say, look at me, I'm multiracial, appealing to all the people.
That's quite, you want people to feel represented, don't you?
You do. So let us know what you think, whether you agree with Sarah. I'm sure some of you do. No, whether you agree with me.
I'm always wrong.
So it's been another tough week for Rishi Sunak, who looks like he's fighting for his premiership again. Sarah, it occurs to me that the Tories, who you know very well, some of them have got a death wish.
I mean,
because where we are, look, Rwanda, finally, he tried to get the Rwanda bill, get the planes up in the air, blocked by the Supreme Court. This is the revised deal. It's been beset by, it's been gripped by a Tory revolt this week.
The right-wingers want amendments, don't they?
They do.
And they haven't got their amendments.
And they want to keep the European judges out of the picture. Good, who wants them involved? Certainly not me. But if he doesn't get this through, then his premiership is doomed.
He has pinned quite a lot on it. I mean, their message is, we have a plan, Labour don't have a plan.
Which is true.
The thing is, Labour don't need to have a plan, because at this stage, all eyes are on the Conservatives and whether they can get this under control.
Everything up.
The problem with the Tory party, and it's not recent, it's historical, it's been going on for years and years and years, is that they always end up fighting like rats in a sack. And this is the huge problem. It's interesting. A few people are talking about David Cameron coming back. I know, make that face. But one thing I would say about David Cameron, believe me, I'm not necessarily his biggest fan, nor I don't think am I.
He certainly isn't a big fan of yours.
No. But one thing he was very good at when he was Prime Minister was keeping the Tory party.
He did.
On an even keel,
yeah.
and keeping the rebels under control. He and George Osborne together were very good at that, and it's really important. I mean, it's almost the most important job of a Tory party leader.
But David Cameron should never be forgiven for legging it from the scene of battle after he lost
Fair enough,
the
all
referendum.
Of that. But the truth is, whoever takes...
But the Tories have been in power now
needs to get his party under control.
But the problem is, when you've been in power for 14 years, which it will be soon, it begins to creak at the seams, decay sets in. Some of the people causing trouble who are trying to vote down his Rwanda bill are standing down at the next election, so they couldn't care less
but
if the Tories lose the next election, or they have a 30,000 majority.
Boris Johnson, quite naughty.
Very mischievous.
Our lovely colleague, but quite naughty to say what he said, which was that to say that he supported the amendments and rebel against the bill. So everybody has their sort of little input, and the problem is it makes it almost impossible.
But on the day they're voting today about Rwanda, we've seen 7 small boats cross the channel.
Yeah, it's not stopping them.
I thought this was going to deter them.
Yeah.
The winter is here, ice cold weather. We had 5 people tragically died in the channel a few days ago. It's not stopping them. Or is it because the people smugglers are saying, you've got to go now,
quickly,
because if this Rwanda thing comes in, it's going to be a major deterrent. Maybe that is what's happening, because I still think it is a deterrent. They don't want to come to Rwanda, they want to come to this country, because as that mayor said in North London, we are El Dorado.
North France.
Northern France. We are El Dorado, we are a soft
I mean, I think
touch.
it's true that we do treat migrants much better than the rest of Europe. I mean, one thing I would say about this country is I've lived in France, I've lived in Italy, for many years. It's much more racist there against migrants than it is here. We're much more accepting of other cultures, and I think that's a good thing. I think the French deliberately make life quite unpleasant for migrants, so that they won't want to stay.
But I think if Rishi Sunak gets through this, he's then got the fight with the House of Lords, unelected, full of judges, full of bishops. The Archbishop of Canterbury, whose church is collapsing, will no doubt be leading another revolt on Rwanda.
But he is basically flogging a dead horse. But he can't let it go, because this is all
he's got nothing else.
And
it's one of his 5 pledges, Sarah.
Exactly. So that's the difficulty. So he has no choice but to push it through.
Yeah.
No choice at all.
And I hope he gets it through.
And I think he will. And I think he has to exercise iron control over the rebels. And I think what he did, which is to say, I will not tolerate any insubordination, is the only course of action he has. And he doesn't have any other options at this stage.
And of course, the Armageddon solution to some of these Tory MPs, if this keeps on, this disunity, he goes for an early election. And how will they feel about that? Because they'll lose their seats. Because we saw that poll this week saying that the Labour Party would win with a majority of 120.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think these are very difficult times. The Tory party can't just replace another leader. If they do get rid of Rishi Sunak, they will have to go to the country.
There will be people with pitchforks,
marching
on number 10.
I do think
have another leader and don't have an election
I'm afraid that even though Labour don't have a solution to this problem, and they really don't, I mean, let's not forget it was Tony Blair who opened the doors and said, everyone come in, the floodgates.
Let's use the expression, they hate that, but that's what he did.
And I no reason to assume that Starmer wouldn't sort of
be more of the same.
Do the same. I mean, he's not come up with any proper solution to this. What the danger for the Tories is that Reform, who are advocating a much tougher approach to immigration, split the Conservative vote and hand the Labour Party a huge landslide. Which they're not. These right wingers are not going to get what they want if they pursue this course of action, and they need to be a bit more sensible about this. They need to understand that if they destroy the Conservative Party, which is what they're trying to do, the alternative is probably going to be worse.
Yeah.
They need to think of the interests of the country, not just of their own interests.
And one Foreign Minister said to me only this week, if we're not careful, it won't be 120 we lose by, it'll be much bigger, and we'll be on the point of extinction.
Yeah.
And the Tory party, one of the oldest, most successful political parties in the world. So what do you make of all this? Let us know at reaction@dailymail.co.uk or comment below. Are the Tories in a death spiral?
So, Andrew, what's getting up your nose this week?
Select committee hearings of MPs are normally boring beyond belief. This week, the Business Select Committee had before it the bosses of Fujitsu. It was astonishing. Paul Patterson, who is the head of Fujitsu Europe, appeared to answer for the company's manifest failings over the post office over the post office scandal. Just to remind people, it is a Fujitsu Horizon IT system that was involved in all these sub-postmasters, some of whom went to jail, some of whom had to pay back tens of thousands of pounds, many of whom have got criminal records.
Some of whom have died. 4
committed suicide, and it's because the Fujitsu IT system was malfunctioning.
Right from the start.
Right from the start, as far back, by the way, as the pilot back in 1996. So this dreadful man appears before MPs and is asked, when you knew the system was failing and there were glitches and bumps on the way, why didn't you do something about it? I don't know, he said. Not once, but twice. He then said that Fujitsu has a moral responsibility to the postmasters and postmistresses, and yes, there has to be compensation. So when's he going to write the cheque? Because so far, it's all come out of the taxpayer. Why is the taxpayer paying for this?
And they're still waiting for their money.
Screw-up with the post office. And let me say, when the courts ruled 39 sub-postmasters were their criminal records could be lifted and there should be compensation, a £58 million compensation package which is agreed. How much do you think the postmasters got? 11 million.
Yes, because a lot of it went to the lawyers,
gobbled up by greedy
No,
lawyers.
I think Fujitsu, I think you're completely right. I think Fujitsu are in the dock for this and they need to make a reparation.
Very quickly. And by the way, there's a public inquiry going on, which only in Britain can go on for 3 years and it still hasn't got anywhere near the end. They should pick the bill up for that too, because we're paying for that, because if they come clean right at the beginning with the post office, we wouldn't need a public inquiry.
No, they knew.
They did.
So,
appalling.
Do you want to know what's getting up my nose? I mean, that obviously is getting up my nose.
I could guess.
Go on then.
Because I know you're a fan, and I know what you write in your column. You're rather a fan of JK Rowling.
I know. I love JK Rowling. I think she's one of the bravest women.
I agree.
And the New Statesman have written a really horrible piece.
Left-leaning.
Left-leaning. Saying that she's the most hated novelist in England. Honestly...
It's appalling.
It's appalling. I mean, all she's ever done is to say very reasonably and quite calmly, I think we just need to be a bit careful about protecting vulnerable women's spaces. That is literally her sin.
Yeah.
And apparently everyone hates her because she's an awful TERF. And I mean, to be honest, if that's what a TERF is, then I'm happy to be called one.
And she doesn't want women who say they're men but still have male appendages in a changing room.
Or in a prison.
Or in a prison, which we saw happened in Scotland.
And she doesn't want, men with penises. No, women with penises, sorry. It's all so confusing.
And she doesn't want teenagers
competing in women's sport because they have a natural advantage. Now, none of this is transphobic. It's just how do we, settle these difficult issues? And I think she's always been quite sort of eloquent about it, and people just get so angry with her. And I think when newspapers like the New Statesman, the Daily Mail is always being accused of, disseminating hate and all this kind of stuff.
Everything.
If that's not disseminating hate, I don't know what is. Saying that someone is the most loathed novelist in England just because they don't agree with what you think.
Of Harry Potter books, by the way, I've read all of them, The Child in Me, which were brilliant, has brought millions of children into reading. The films were a triumph, and she is great. And she also doesn't want young teenagers' bodies pumped filled with pills to change their hormones.
No, and I think a lot of people agree with her, and a lot of people support her. And, we've all been on a bit of a journey with this thing, because any women, I mean, there's a lot of misogyny that underpins all of this, which is that a lot of people hate the idea that women like me and JK Rowling and, Julie Bindel and all of these people are a bit cautious about women giving up their rights.
Yeah.
And, maybe we are all a bit superannuated, maybe we've all been around the block a few times, but the misogyny that's aimed at any woman who sort of dares to express any concerns around, as you say, hormone blocking.
She's speaking up for the majority.
It's just awful, and this is for the New Statesman to basically incite all this hatred against her. I think it's really unfair.
And you can imagine the torrent of abuse she's had on social media. And while we're talking about JK Rowling, I still think it's shameful that Emma Watson and that rather poor actor Daniel Radcliffe, who owe their careers to JK Rowling,
stand up for her.
Still won't stand up for her. And by the way,
and in fact, boycotted her, I think.
Emma Watson's character Hermione in Harry Potter was intensely irritating, as she is in real life.
No, but the thing is about Emma Watson's character Hermione in Harry Potter was that she was a kind of empowered young girl. She was a kind of she was always the one who got everything sorted. She was inspirational.
She's a bit of JK Rowling in her.
Incredible. A very clever, brilliant sort of feminist, little mini feminist, and so I think she gets an awfully hard ride, and I don't feel sorry for her because I'm sure she's perfectly capable of looking after herself, but I just think it's very unfair. Anyway, that's it for today. Join us again next Wednesday for more reaction to the stories making the headlines.
And make sure you like and subscribe so that you never miss an episode, particularly if you're at The Guardian or The New Statesman. See you again next Wednesday. Goodbye.